Well, let's move from the 1920s to the 2020s, and let's talk about a horse you're extremely proud of, Masked Crusader, who had such a fantastic showing in last year's Everest. What were you most proud of in that almost in 2021?
For a horse to miss the start the way he missed the start and sit that far off the world's best sprinters and go down by, I think it was 0.2 of a length in the end, well, it just doesn't happen. You know, it happens in maidens, it happens in benchmark races, it may happen in claiming races, but it doesn't happen in these sorts of races. He's just, you know, to see him, even though he didn't win, to see him come from there, your heart jumps out of your chest. And we don't own him, we didn't breed him. He was bred by a Gill guy who remained brought back into the ownership, and but you feel like you're a part of it, and to get so close, just if he jumped half a length closer to them, you wonder what might have happened.
Welcome to another edition of the Everest Connections. I'm AP Harold. We're joined by another fantastic horseman down under the island continent, Australia, Van Diemen's Land, whatever you want to call it. Sam Matthews is the General Manager, Operations and Nominations for Swettenham Stud. Sam, appreciate your time.
AP, appreciate it. Thanks. Great to be here.
900 acres of plush real estate and two wineries abut you. It's a pretty good place to call the office, isn't it?
We are. It was surrounded by water. We've got the river just right next door to me here. Beautiful, lush pastures, and the winery. It's incredible in Nagambie.
And you're working for the legendary Sangster family. Adam, second generation guy. What does it mean to you to be involved with that type of history in this fine industry?
There's not too many farms around that have the history of the Sangster family or the Swettenham stud name, but it's the people. It's working for somebody like Adam that he cares about everybody else before himself. It's about the breeders getting a result. It's about the racetrack success. We never race a horse by ourselves. We're working with a great person that really does want everybody else to succeed, to the point where we bump our own mares to get other people's mares in just to make sure they get it.
And Sam, you mentioned it is about people. Even though it's the horse racing industry, the horses can't do it by themselves. Let's delve into your past. I know you've spent some time in the States, but where in Australia were you born, and where'd you grow up?
So I grew up over in Western Australia. So we had a wheat and sheep farm over there, and we used to breed to race, but very, very different to the operation here at Swettenham. It was, you leave the carton of beer there when you drop your mare off, and there's a paddock serve. You know it's all done when the carton of beer disappears. So very much outback, and breed to race. We buy a few here and there, but we just targeted country cups, and the family had a fair bit of success. And we've scaled back a little bit, but certainly not a commercial operation, more just breed to race, something to keep the sheep company.
And what did you do when you were over in the United States?
So when I finished school, I obviously had a passion for horses, and went and became an accountant, and realised that was a bit boring. Always wanted to get back into horses, and so I went and lived over in Canada and the States, running a large retail business there, just to understand more about business across the board. I thought, oh, if horses, you know, if the economy tanks and things slow down, horses might be one of the first to go. Turns out it's probably the accountants that are first to go, and then probably the retail, and the horses seem like they're the safest. So I'm very, very lucky to be in the position I'm now.
Sam, you talk about in business, you got to know your customer. And I saw another fantastic interview with you on Blast, and you were talking about, on the flip side, your customers are the folks who have the mares. You made an interesting comment that roughly 25% of folks do fantastically well. About half, 50% of folks who are breeding mares break even, and 25%, have some losses. What would you advise a potential client who wants to get into the industry to at least put them in that break even, if not into the fantastically successful category?
I think the way the market sits at the moment, it's important to be breeding the top end commercial horses, and not all of us can do that. You know, not everyone's in a position to buy a mare for 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 and another $100,000 service fee. But go in partnership. You know, find some other like-minded people and go in together, rather than going one yourself and spending it all the way through and hoping for the best. Spread your risk. You know, nobody invests in shares with just one stock. You want to spread your risk and you can actually breed at the top level, but you don't have to do it by yourself.
And that's interesting, because in that same interview, you said that that's much more common, the syndicate approach on your side of the ledger with the studs than it is on mares. Are you seeing more people, though, on the mare side get into what you were just talking about, is I guess, amortizing, spreading your risk?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing more of it. It's still a long way behind the racehorses. I think the study is 1 in 185 Australians own a share in a racehorse. Number of mare owners or per capita, I wouldn't know, but we are seeing more and more of the syndicated model, and trainers doing it too. A filly retires off the track with 10 owners, and then they decide to breed from her and produce something and either sell it or race it. It's a great way to go. It means that you're not copying the bill all the way through, but you can purely target breed to race or purely target breed to sell. But you're in there for the long haul, not just a transactional racehorse.
Sam Matthews is our guest on the Everest Connections. He's the general manager, operations and nominations for Swettenham Stud. I noticed on your website 5 or 6 horses listed, and these are alpha dogs, as we say in the real world, or alpha equine in the horse racing world. Do they ever get to go out and hang out, chill, play with one another? Or are these lone wolves, so to speak?
No, they certainly get to hang out. So just next to Martha's here, there's their little large day yards. So they spend most of the time out in the day yards, particularly in the off season. And then during the season, they normally cover in the morning, head out for the sort of mid-morning break, in for another cover at lunch, back out again and back in again. So they spend a lot of their time outside, not too much time in the boxes.
Sam, how much of your job is something like this, a hypothetical? You've got a guy that's made it big in finance. He's always loved to pick the ponies, play the ponies. Maybe granddad was a blue collar guy, and now he's honoring a family legacy. And he spent a couple of $100,000, whether it's American or Australian or 150,000 euros or pounds. It's a lot of money. And he has a nice mare, and he's curious which of your studs would fit best in terms of bloodlines. How do you go about analyzing that and giving him some information so he can make a decision?
So we try to be very objective about it. We look at obviously our stallion roster, but also other stallions around to say what might be most suitable for them to give them the best commercial return. Not every farm is comfortable to do that, but we want to make sure the breeder gets the best results. So we'll look at ours, we'll look at a number of other stallions around, and we want to know how much they want to spend or how much they should spend. You don't want to put a $50,000 service fee into a $1,000 mare. Similarly, you don't want to put a $1,000 service fee into a $100,000 mare. So working out the commercial, what their grand plans are, first of all, if they want to race or if they want to breed, and helping them out.
Let's get back into racehorses, and let's talk lineage. We're going to get into Masked Crusader. We're going to talk about Toronado, but before that, High Chaparral. What type of blood line did he create?
So High Chaparral has been exceptional, more so in Australia and the Southern Hemisphere than the Northern Hemisphere. Horses like So You Think and Done Deal, Alpine Eagles doing the job, and obviously Toronado. He's been a real revelation, starting with So You Think and then Done Deal and then Toronado coming through. They work incredibly well with Danehill line mares. They're versatile. You can get a 1,000-meter Group 1 winner, and you can get something that can get out to a bit of a trip as well. So I think the versatility of what High Chaparral throws is outstanding, and working with the pedigrees of the females and the mares we've got here, it just crosses so well.
You'll hear from time to time, at least casual racing fans, and I put myself there, I'm not an expert like you are, complain a little bit that, hey, the best horses go to stud too soon. We want to see them throw the football more, or score some points or get some more at bats, to use a baseball analogy over here in the States. How do you guys in the industry make the decision between let him run and take him to stud?
There's obviously a commercial value there. If you've got a colt stallion proposition that might be worth 10, 15, $20 million. If they don't go to stud for that year, there's the missed revenue for that period. But there's also the chance that they can hurt themselves, they can break down, a lot of different things that can happen, and you need to retire the horse at their maximum commercial value. It maybe is a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, or 5-year-old, but the risk versus the reward, it's often better to retire them, send them to stud. They've shown what they can do. They've won one of their better races, and then retire them first. Other people are happy to push on, but I challenge those people to have something worth that sort of money and want to push on themselves and see how they go.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. I mean, it's easy to risk money that you'll never see versus an asset that you can take to the bank, and you'd be kicking yourself if the horse, something happened to it, not only emotionally for the horse, but it's honestly it's property, it's business.
Yeah, and it's similar with Hong Kong. We get a lot of offers for Hong Kong trading, and you sell geldings up there for 1.8 million, and a lot of people say, oh, I can't believe we've sold another one. Well, if you bought the horse for $50,000, or you've bred it and it's won a couple of races, and you get offered, you need to win $2.5 to $3 million to get that back and break square. So that then pays for a few more horses, and we have a bit more fun with it. But you have to have a commercial mindset, regardless of whether you're breeding to race or breeding to sell.
Well, let's have a bit of fun here. This is the Everest Connections. We're going to go back to the hypothetical, the finance guy. He's out of Perth, okay? He's the best banker in Perth. He's a third generation guy who's loved horses. He's got some money, and he's got that mare, and he says, you know what? I'd like this yearling that I'm going to pay some big bucks to be raised, to have a chance to compete in the Everest 3 or 4 years from now. What are some things that you would be talking to him about?
I think if the goal is to be competing in the Everest, you need to make sure that you're going to a speed stallion. There's no point in going to a Highland Reel, for example, that we stand here, that was a 1.5 mile horse, 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles. You need to make sure you've got the speed. You need to make sure that the pedigrees line up, that there's a bit of research we go back 7 generations to have a look and see what may or may not work. And also the type as well. You're not going to get too many horses that are 17 hands that can go on and win an Everest. You need to get the right type that is well put together, that the physical attributes of the stallion complement the physical attributes of the mare. And we get it wrong more than we get it right, as the most breeders. But it's the keeping the dream alive and trying to negate the things that might not work.
And you just hit on something that's so profound in horse racing, getting it wrong more often than you get it right. In America and baseball, we talk about if you're a 300 hitter, you're a Hall of Famer, 3 out of 10. If you went 3 out of 10 in horse racing, they'd name the Hall of Fame for you. In the Kentucky Derby, you got 20 horses. In the Everest, what is it, 12? And you're trying to beat everybody. How humbling of a sport, of an industry is it? And how much sweeter does that make victories?
I think particularly when you're breeding them yourself and you're taking them all the way through and you're doing the work to go and find that right stallion for your mare. And if you're breeding 50 mares a year and you might get 1 stakes winner every 2 years, that's a great result. So you do celebrate the good times. The bad times are always going to be there, but you celebrate the good times even harder. I think we had Dennis Pagan, who was a great AFL coach, then turned his hand to training, and he trained the Derby winner. He was crying. He was over the moon. It gives me shivers talking about it. That sort of thing just doesn't happen in any other sport because the chances of it happening are so limited.
And we've talked about it is an industry and there are dollar figures to be examined. But if you're in auto racing, it's a machine. These are animals and there's an emotional component. They're mammals just like us. You connect with them on levels that's far beyond business. It's far beyond anything you would do with something that's not living and breathing. How much joy and also how much pain is there in that side of the equation?
Yeah, you wear your heart on your sleeve, absolutely. So we're out there foaling. We've started foaling for the year, and sometimes people see these foals that are day old. Sometimes they're there for the foaling, and they see them like their children. They grow up. They go from being 50 kilos to being 600 kilos, and see them all the way through, and they have a connection through to them. It really is as much about the heart as it is about the head. And some people that shouldn't be breeding with a mare because it might not be commercial, they're going to breed with it anyway because that's their baby and it's going to be with them forever.
General manager of one of the top stud farms in the world. That's Sam Matthews, our guest on the Everest Connections. What are you seeing with the Everest race itself impacting breeding in Australia? This is the world's richest turf race. This is a big time race. How much is that impacting how your industry unfolds?
It's a hard one because there's obviously a limited field in the race, and you can target a golden slipper, but there's a lot of other races around that you might pick up along the way or might pick up instead. Whereas the Everest, it's one race. So I don't think it necessarily shapes breeding, but it drives people to the industry, which is fantastic. It allows people to dream about getting into the Melbourne Cup or the Everest or whatever it may be to get in there. But I don't think it actually shapes breeding as much as what the general public may perceive it does.
Sam, I threw a couple of hypotheticals at you about our imaginary banker, the financier in Perth, but I'm going to ask you in real life, how do you approach purchasing the particular stud horses that you have? There's a finite number of dollars and there's a finite amount of stable space and there's a bunch of horses out there you could pick. What do you look for?
So when we're going to buy a stallion, we want to make sure that we have something for everyone, something that complements our roster and doesn't cannibalize anything else in the roster. So we want to make sure that they buy a commercial stallion themselves. They've got a great physique. They look the part. They're going to throw a nice horse, which is a bit of a guessing game, but black cats, black kittens sort of thing. You can make sure if you've got a nice horse in front of you, good chance they're going to throw you a nice horse. They pedigree, performance. You want to make sure that they are the physique that you want to see in a yearling that you would go and buy yourself.
What was it that got you interested in the sport of kings? There's so many stories. Everybody has one. What hooked you?
Mine was sitting at the farm at my grandfather's house and sitting there watching the races. He had probably 30 or 40 racehorses, and we'd go out to the bush races, non-TAB, go and race for $1,000. It'd cost you more to get there than what you would win in prize money. But just seeing the incredible ability of the horses, how loved they are, and how difficult it is to get there, the reward, that little pot of gold at the end, even though it might not be overly financially rewarding for those sorts of races, just the passion behind it, the thought behind it, the amount of work that goes into it to go around for less than a minute sometimes.
Here we are in 2022 conducting these interviews via video conference, but it's neat that the folks for whom you're working, the Sangster family, you could point to them as having internationalized thoroughbred racehorsing back in the 70s when they started mixing the continents and the bloodlines. How proud are you to be able to continue that innovation?
It's amazing that Robert had the foresight back in the day to bring a horse like Danehill out to Australia and utilise the two hemispheres. It's certainly changed breeding globally to be able to do what we can do. Horses can cover 200 mares in the southern hemisphere, go northern hemisphere. You can cover mares southern hemisphere time, but still have them in the northern hemisphere if they're not going to shuttle. It's incredible, and it's not just a commercial thing, but it gives everybody the ability to breed to these horses. Some horses might stand for $10,000 in one hemisphere and $100,000 in the other hemisphere, but it allows everybody to access these incredible bloodlines.
You know, here in the States, when somebody says an Aussie, an Australian, we think friendly, we think maybe outgoing, maybe even outrageous. But one of the underrated qualities you guys have is competitive. You take a lot of pride, and not a lot of folks down there. You're tucked away, sometimes forgot. How much down under pride is there in what Nature Strip has accomplished on the global stage?
I think, yeah, whether it be Nature Strip or Black Caviar and these horses that we've sent overseas that have been back to Scenic Blast, Scenic Shot, and these sorts of horses, it makes you feel proud. People stay up until any hour of the morning to watch their horse race, whether it be in the US or the UK. It's a horse that they've never seen before. They've probably not even had a bet, but they're so passionate that this carries a flag for us, and it shows that we are breeding some of the best horses in the world. I think probably as many people watching Royal Ascot as watching the Commonwealth Games right now. It really does. You feel like you're a part of the horse and a part of the ownership.
Swettenham stud, General Manager Sam Matthews is our guest on the Everest Connections. Today, with all the science and technology and DNA test, you can pretty much say, hey, yes or no, the sire is this particular horse. Back in the day, some wrangling, some horse trading, some fibbing, some crazy stuff. I'll bet there's some stories, some of them partially, if not wholly true, of, yeah, you paid a bunch of money, but the stud was a lame duck and not a Triple Crown threat.
I think there's many stories from before my time about some things that may have gone on. Luckily, where everything gets tested now, we know exactly what you get. Doesn't mean you go to a champion racehorse with a champion mare. It doesn't mean you're going to get a champion foal. But no, certainly there's a lot of ways that people used to play a few games back in the day, whether it be to set up to have a bet or to do whatever they'd like to do. But no, I think we're probably one of the cleanest sports in the world. The way that we're regulated, whether it be through gambling or through testing, where it's so heavily regulated that there's very few, if any, cheats left.
Well, let's move from the 1920s to the 2020s, and let's talk about a horse you're extremely proud of, Masked Crusader, who had such a fantastic showing in last year's Everest. What were you most proud of in that almost in 2021?
For a horse to miss the start the way he missed the start and sit that far off the world's best sprinters and go down by, I think it was 0.2 of a length in the end, it just doesn't happen. It happens in maidens, it happens in benchmark races, it may happen in claiming races, but it doesn't happen in these sorts of races. He's just, to see him, even though he didn't win, to see him come from there, your heart jumps out of your chest. And we don't own him, we didn't breed him. He was bred by a Gill guy who remained or brought back into the ownership, and but you feel like you're a part of it, and to get so close, just if he jumps half a length closer to them, you wonder what might have happened.
And you mentioned that too, because it is a sprint race. It's not like, say, the Belmont, which is longer. It's a lot like in track and field for the Homo sapiens, for the human beings. If you stumble out of the block, you've really put yourself behind the 8 ball.
Correct. It's very, very difficult in a sprint race to be able to make up the amount of ground that he made up, particularly in the home straight. You've got traffic to compete with as well. In the Olympics, 100 meters down the lane, that's just you, and you're basically in the line. This one, you've got the jockey, you've got the track, you've got the other horses in the way. For him to be able to do what he did, he deserved the win, in my opinion, but he obviously didn't get it. But hopefully we go one better this year.
I was going to say, what does Masked Crusader have to do this year to cross that line first?
Just that jump, jump a touch better. I think certainly the jockey did nothing wrong. It's an incredibly hot race. I think you run that race 3 times and you get 3 different results. So I think it's whatever happens on the day. The track may be maybe a little bit more worn out on the inside or the outside. There's so many factors that can come into play there that it's just the smallest of things that can change the result.
Let's go back to Masked Crusader's father. And when you look at Toronado, what in his pedigree most intrigues you? What's the fascinating thing you see there?
So we're a big fan of milers. So I think Australians breed typically 2-year-old speed. It's been a real trend we've moved towards, whereas we love the fact that he was world champion miler. He had an enormous turn of foot. He's a beautiful looking horse. You'd hand on heart, you'd be difficult to find a better looking horse. He's got a beautiful, kind eye. He stamps all of his progeny, but his pedigree, there's Australian Heart of Dreams, a very good Australian miler in his pedigree as well. But he's the epitome. If you were to draw the ideal horse, in my opinion, that I'd be drawing him to look at.
Sam Matthews, our guest, just a few minutes left with him, the general manager, operations and nominations, Swettenham stud in Australia. And let's say that you've got a mare and you've contracted to take her to stud with Toronado. Generally, how far out is that? Is that a couple of months? He's got several hundred coverings, it looks like, per year. It's not like you can just pick up the phone and say, hey, tomorrow.
No, it's a little bit like probably, just trying to think which race meeting in the States, Kentucky Derby Day, when the gates open, everybody floods through. That's when we announce the service fees and everybody floods in to try to get that spot. Obviously, we look after people that have been supporters. We want to make sure that we're getting the best mares to win, but also looking after the people that have looked after us. So it's a delicate process. We do obviously have to say no to a number of mares. It's a great position to be in on one hand, but it's also a tough position because you'd love to take them all, but you have to be very selective, make sure that the best mares are coming to him on pedigree and on their performance, and also that the right people are getting the mares in.
How long is a top horse like Toronado, if he can live to be 30 years old, a serviceable stud?
He's a young stallion. He's only 12 now, so he's still very young to have the results he's had right now. You'd probably think he'd more 15, 16 years old, but he's had the success in both hemispheres. He can keep going. He can keep covering, till his early to mid 20s, depending on how he goes. And he's actually going to stay in Australia after this season, so he's not going to shuttle back, which just means he gets that 6 months off and he can enjoy himself in the paddock and then come back and cover just in Australia moving forward. So it's great of Al Shakab, who are incredible people, fantastic investors, that they're going to leave him down here.
Sam, as we approach the 6th iteration of the Everest, from an Australian horseman's perspective, how has this race grown in both popularity and, I guess, international intrigue?
I remember the day it was released, and it was a point of conjecture for a lot of people to say it's a lot of prize money, and it was less then. It's obviously even a lot more now, but it's grown incredible legs. It's something that people talk about a lot, something that people do try to target, something that it draws a wider audience. I think it's been a great thing for racing. And to be honest with you, when it first came out, I thought, but it's the prestige as much as anything else. It's that you are the best sprint horse in Australia, and it can change so many people's lives that may not be involved in the horse in any way at all.
Sam, how many Everest races have you attended, and will you be at the 2022 race?
I've been to 2 of them, and it will depend on our runners. We've got 40 odd racehorses at the moment. So if we've got runners in Sydney, I'll be there. If we've got runners in Melbourne at Caulfield Cup meeting, I'll be there. But it really comes down to where our runners are. But you'll hear me from Utah if Masked Crusader gets close.
There you go. And tell me, from a theatrical social scene setting, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much fun, how much chaos are the people in the stands and up in the boxes throwing and putting on?
Yeah, it's one of those races you don't actually know who owns the horse, so the people are yelling and screaming that much with that much excitement that you have no idea. And if I was a cameraman, I'd be out of a job for sure, because I wouldn't be able to tell you who the owner is. I'd be able to find the trainer pretty quickly because they'd be bawling. I'd probably be bawling if I was an owner. There'd be tears everywhere. But it's like a NFL final. The atmosphere is incredible.
And Sam, finally, you're living a dream. You've chased a career that intrigues you. It's very competitive. You've got a top flight job. If there's a young boy, a young girl who's watching this and they're thinking about, hey, being an accountant is safe, but I really want to go for horse racing, what's your advice?
There's many ways to sort of move through the different businesses, but work out where you want to be in 5 or 10 years time and work backwards from there. Make sure you take your time to get the experience, meet as many people as you can, and talk to people. Ask them how they got to where they are, or where they want to be, or how they can help. There's so many people in this industry that are happy to help, but not enough people get asked for their help. So we're more than happy to help people. We take a lot of students on and do a lot of seminars to do anything we can to bring people in and bring them forward.
Well, he certainly helped me. I've learned that it's 1 cactus and 2 or more cacti. Sam Matthews, General Manager, Operations and Nominations, Swettenham Stud in Australia. Appreciate your time on the Everest Connections.
Thanks, AP. Thank you.